Hello, this is old Mr. Kent of MrKent.com, and I'm still having to take off in the morning because on this particular day it got up to about 102 degrees. In the morning it's around 70 or so it's safe to fly. So I thought, well, let's see, there's these power lines that I always have to deal with when I take off going looking into the sun. There's not a whole lot of scenery in my son's yard there, so I like to take off flying across the corral and the chicken coop, and then I have to watch out for these power lines. I thought, well, this morning I'm going to see how many power lines they are. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so. And I thought maybe I could fly between the power lines. So I'm dropping down a little bit, so I get below the one up above, and then there's that cable. And then about now, my Mavic Air 2 was screaming at me because I was so close to everything. But I flew on through and didn't run into anything. I wouldn't recommend that unless you are really sure of what you're seeing out the monitor. So anyway, there's those power lines. I thought, well, since I'm dealing with power lines, maybe I could tell you some stories about flying my Cessnas under power lines, because I did a lot of that stuff. You know, I think if you've been following my channel, I love to fly low, and I still do, but back then I did a lot. Well, when I first got my 150, and by the way, where I flew out of Pasco, Washington, and Pasco, Washington is flat country, just like this area, except it's not quite as flat, but it's flat country. You can fly along over the sagebrush. And I was out flying one day in my 150 all alone, and there was this high voltage transmission line going, that goes across the country. And I thought, hey, I'll see if I can fly under a power line. Well, those high voltage transmission lines, they're so high above the ground, you could fly just about any plane under them. But I had never flown under a power line, so I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I got down low and I flew under the power line, and sure enough, that was not that hard. So I thought, all right. Well, when my brother came over, and I mentioned that in a previous video, that he didn't have a plane, and he came over and I let him fly my plane. Well, when he first got there, I took him out and gave him a tour of the countryside, and he had a video camera. I said, you want to make a cool video? And so we went over to that same power line that I had gone over, and I flew under it, and he was so excited. He thought, that is really cool. So anyway, I kind of got to thinking, after that, I mean, this was as time goes by, and I thought most power lines, like the one we just flew through, they're about 50 feet, 40, 50 feet above the ground, and if there's no other low lines on them, like we just flew through there, but most don't have all that. And so when you're out in the country and you fly under a power line, you got 50 feet to deal with. And then I got to think, every time I come in for a landing, my wheels are about like 2 feet off the ground. And so as long as my wheels are 2 feet off the ground, and my plane, like we'll give it 10 feet of height when it's flying, I should be able to fly under any old power line I want. So anyway, that kind of got me hooked on flying under power lines. And when I take somebody flying and I say, you want to do something exciting, and of course they like to do that kind of stuff, except at one time this guy wanted me to take his kids flying, and so he sat in the front seat and they sat in the back, and we were flying around. And as we were coming back from our flight, I saw some power lines. I said, you want to have some fun? Well, of course they did. So then I nosedived down, turned around, came back, and come down underneath the power lines, and just my normal thing, but it was really scary for them. So when we landed, the poor guy came up to me and he was mad. He said, don't you ever take my kids under a power line again. Of course, to them it was exciting, and to me it was like secondhand stuff. So I did a lot of flying. I learned, though, you ask the people that are with you if they want to fly under a power line. And I had some times that I came pretty close to making a mistake. The one time, just north of Pasco, just up south of Connell. If you look on the map, there's a lot of plateaus in that area. And there was a power line that I was flying along the top of this plateau, and the power line came to a pole, and then it dropped down into this little valley. I thought, well, I'm just going to, go underneath that power line as it's going down into the valley. Only thing is the power line dealt more down towards, it had a steeper angle than the side of the plateau had. So as I'm coming underneath the power line, I have less and less room, and but as it turned out, I made it okay. But that was kind of a close call. So anyway, you live and learn, like they say, in plane crashes. But then there's been some other times when I was really surprised by power lines. One time, there's a town called Prosser, which is about a 20-minute flight to the west out of Pasco, and it's in a little valley. And they have a little airstrip up there, and it's right next to what's called the Red Barn Restaurant. And so I took my wife. We'd go up there for dinner or something like that. So we went up there for a snack, and it was a nice evening. And so we were coming back, and we were flying along the ridge up above the valley where Prosser is located. And as we're going along, there's a high voltage transmission line that goes across in front of us, and and then it dropped down into the valley, and I wasn't interested in flying under it, but I was at about a little higher than the power line as it appeared. So we're going along about 100 miles an hour, just cruising, and I'm looking out down into the valley and not paying a whole lot of attention when all of a sudden my wife says, "Look." And, they have this ground wire that's about 20 feet higher than the other big wires, and you don't even see it from the distance. And there it was in front of us. And so I yanked back on the yoke, and the nose went up, and, of course, we made it over the top of it. When you do that, when you yank back on the yoke and the nose goes up, your butt goes into the bottom of the seat. But anyway, so she was my co-pilot that day, and she saved my life. Another time when I kind of got scared by a power line, I worked at a boarding school, and there was a lot of boys there, and I would do a candy drop from my airplane. And so it was a day to drop some candy to them. That's where you fly over with a paper bag full of Tootsie Rolls and with little flags on them, and you dump it out, and they go flittering down, and the guys chase after it. So anyway, my wife drove us out to the little airstrip, which was about 20 minutes away, and about 10 minutes in the plane. And so she dropped us off, got in the car, and started heading back. And so my friend, he gets in the plane, we get in the plane, we take off. We didn't get up very high, but I could see my wife on this long, straight stretch, and she was driving along in the car, and probably going about 60 miles an hour, and we're going on, 100 or so. But I said, let's go down next, I wanted to come down next to her and just fly along right next to her as she went along this road and on the right-hand side so she could look out and see the plane. So I put it into a dive, which made us get up to about 120 miles an hour. I got down to about 50 feet above the ground, and we're coming up on her, and we're not quite there, and I'm looking at the car and looking down and we're over a green field, a farm field. And I'm looking at the car and watching my flight and looking at the car, and I look up, and there was a power line that went across that field, which I had never noticed before. And we were so close that I remember I could see the copper-colored wire. So anyway, once again, I yanked the yoke back, and the plane nosed up, and my friend, he raised his arm in the air, like, he scared him. So anyway, we did our candy drop and everything, and we made it okay, and we're coming back, and as we're coming back to the airstrip, we flew over that same field, and I said, there's that power line we almost hit. And he said, power line? I didn't see no power line. And I said, well, how come you threw your arms up in the air? Well, he was sitting in the passenger side, and there's a yoke that the passenger can fly the plane with. And I said, didn't you see it? He said, no, I was just sitting there. All of a sudden, that yoke thing came right at me. And that's what scared him. That's why I threw his arms up in the air, because that yoke was coming right at him. So anyway, And one other real quick one, I took a boy flying one time, and there was this valley that I always wanted to fly under a power line. It's the Toucan River Valley at the north end of the Blue Mountains, and there was this big old power line that went across that valley. And I took this boy flying, and we dropped Grandma off in Lewiston. We were headed back, and I said, "You want to go underneath that power line?" He said, "Yeah." So we dropped down, and I went up to the top of the valley, and now we're going crosswise to the way we're supposed to be going home. And there's the weather vane that my son wanted me to make out of an old model airplane engine and stuff. So my other one wore out that I had made. So anyway, we went down, and I dove down. I followed the valley down, and there was this big power line, and we went under the power line. What I didn't realize was there was a whole bunch of other little lines, higher and lower and higher and lower than where we were. So we were going up and then diving and going up and diving to miss all the, like another 2 or 3 sets of power lines that I hadn't seen from 5,000 feet up. So anyway, those are some power line stories. As you can see up at the top of the screen, there's my favorite power lines. And there I am landing my Mavic Air 2. And so I want to thank you for watching and putting up with my stories. And God bless.